Hello, and welcome to the Wedding and Beyond podcast. On today's episode, we are talking about wedding and event insurance. The COVID-19 pandemic brought weddings and events to a screeching halt, just like it did with everything else in the world. Couples and their planners had to quickly figure out what to do. In this situation, there was no plan B, C, or D because no one ever imagined something like this happening. There were tough questions to answer. Should we postpone? Should we cancel? Should we have an intimate ceremony now and a bigger party later in the year or next year? Let's be honest. Before this pandemic, many couples did not see the need for wedding insurance. But those who did and had purchased insurance were in a better situation if they had to change their wedding date or alter their plans. COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of wedding and event insurance, and I believe it will no longer be considered an unnecessary expense. So today we are speaking with David Berke, who is the founder and CEO of eWed Insurance, which he founded in 2018. He has over 20 years experience at the forefront of the wedding and event industry and understands and appreciates the importance of having insurance coverage for one of the most important days of anyone's lives. In the early 1990s, David joined premier wedding brand Colin Cowie Lifestyles as managing partner and general counsel. He worked with Colin for over 25 years, helping to grow the company into a multi-million-dollar business. With eWed Insurance, he has designed programs and coverage that take into consideration all the modern needs of weddings and events for today's generation. Welcome, David. Thank you for joining us today.
Good, Sophia. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on the show. And, I want to just offer my condolences to everyone who's lost a loved one from COVID, and my prayers for everyone who's suffering from COVID in any way. And, hopefully in the near future, we'll see a return to normalcy.
Yes, we're all praying for that. We definitely are. Thank you, David. Well, I'm just gonna go right into some of the questions that I have for you this morning, because as you and I were talking off camera, this pandemic has definitely changed the way event planners, wedding planners do business, and what the weddings and events look like moving forward for at least the foreseeable future.
Right.
And what's even more important, though, what this pandemic has brought to light is the need for wedding and event insurance, right? A lot of times people look at it as an unnecessary expense, but it really is necessary. And I think this pandemic has shed light on that. So would you please explain to us, what is wedding and event insurance?
Certainly, happy to. So wedding insurance is not like any other, it's very much like any other insurance. It's you buy insurance to cover yourself against an unknown, unforeseen event in the future that causes you harm or injury or to lose money. There's two types of wedding insurance: liability and cancellation. Liability insurance is typically required by the venue, and that covers you against any injury or damage that you cause to the venue or any of your guests cause to the venue. And it also can cover you if someone leaves the wedding drunk and they get into a car accident. It can provide, legal coverage for legal fees to defend you in a lawsuit.
Okay.
So that's liability insurance.
Okay.
Cancellation insurance is if you have to cancel or postpone the wedding and you lose money. You lose deposits to your venue, your florist, your caterer, your photographer, your band, your DJ. It could reimburse you for those lost deposits under certain situations.
Okay. As a wedding planner, I find that venues often require the liability insurance. But because of that, sometimes it's hard to convince couples to purchase the cancellation insurance. Do you suggest or recommend that they have both?
The answer to that's an easy yes. I'm in the business.
I know.
I would not have gotten into this business if I didn't believe in the product that we were selling.
Right.
So liability insurance, yes, most couples buy it because the venue's requiring it. It's $119 with eWed. It's an easy buy. It takes 3 minutes online to buy it with the application. Cancellation insurance has always been optional, And we've seen a huge uptick in the number of people buying cancellation insurance because they realized all of the potential things that can go wrong. Although
Yes.
COVID is no longer covered, if you bought last year, and you would have COVID coverage for this year because it was an unknown event last
Right.
year.
Right.
This year, every insurance company in the world that I'm aware of has excluded COVID from coverage. But more and more couples now say, okay, even though COVID's excluded, there's other things that can cause illness or an injury or severe weather, a vendor bankruptcy, a fire
Right.
or flood in your venue or caterer's kitchen, which all can cause a potential loss.
Okay. So if COVID is not covered, is there any type of protection that just say someone just recently got engaged and
Mhm.
they're looking to um, buy insurance for their wedding, whether it's this year or next year, but we know COVID is not covered. So
Right.
is there any other type of protection that they can look to relating to COVID?
There's
Or
not from an insurance product, no.
okay,
COVID is excluded under what they call a known condition.
okay,
Insurance basically says when you buy it, if there's a condition that you're aware of that's likely to cause a loss, it's excluded from coverage.
hmm
But what as a former wedding planner, what I
yes,
would suggest to all of my couples is have the discussion with your venue, have the discussion with your vendors. What if COVID causes us to postpone the wedding? What if COVID causes us weddings usually don't get canceled, they get postponed.
usually yes.
And then you have to ask, what happens to my deposit? If we
hmm
have to move the wedding from September of this year to September of next year, will my deposit transfer forward? And then I'm also, advising uh, people that call me, even it's not on an insurance related basis, but if you can negotiate a slower deposit schedule with your vendors,
Oh,
a
that's good.
caterer doesn't need 100% or 50% or 90% of the money 6 months prior to the wedding. They're
Exactly.
not hiring the staff, they're not buying the food.
Right.
Obviously, from a vendor's perspective, they like getting the money because that's what keeps your business going. And I
Yes.
can't argue against that. But try to negotiate a delayed deposit schedule with your vendors where the bulk of the deposits are paid closer to the actual wedding date.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. It really does. Um, let's talk right now about force majeure and what does that mean and how does that relate to wedding insurance?
It's funny you ask that. Pre-COVID, I think 90% of the brides out there would not even know what force majeure meant. Now 100% know exactly what force majeure means. Force majeure, it's the small print in a contract that no one read up until now. And it basically says that if something happens that's beyond the control of either party, then they're excused from performing under the contract, or their obligation to perform under the contract is delayed.
hmm
What most force majeure clauses don't say in contracts is, okay, there's a force majeure, there's a forest fire, there's a earthquake, there's a snowstorm, there's a government order to shut down like we have now. What
hmm
happens to the deposit? Everyone understands that, okay, force majeure means you're not going to have your wedding on April 3rd.
Right.
But it begs the question with the venue and the vendors, okay, what happens next?
Got it.
Is the vendor responsible for returning the deposit? And
Right.
I see that being negotiated both ways. You have couples that say, give us back the deposit, and you have vendors that saying, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. I
Right.
was ready, willing, and able to perform for your wedding. I should be
hmm
entitled to keep the
To
deposit.
keep the deposit.
And my advice there is have that discussion with your vendors in advance so everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, I've seen different event planners handle it differently. And, I guess there's no right way for anybody. It just depends on the circumstance and the people involved when it comes to
Right. And you could
deposits.
see,
Yeah.
exactly. You might find two photographers that are relatively equal in price and the quality of their service. And one of them says, under force majeure, I keep your deposit. And another one says, under force majeure, I return your deposit. You know which one the bride's going to pick.
Right, of course. Of course, definitely. And it's as a planner, it's kind of hard because you understand your couples, you understand their point of view as well, and you're there to support them, but you also understand other vendors as well, where they're coming from. So trying to be a mediator, so to speak, in those situations sometimes when you have a client that really, really wants their deposit back and trying to find the
Right,
best way possible to remedy that situation.
right.
Um, sometimes
Well,
it's a little difficult sometimes.
correct. It's not easy, and it's interesting. I had an idea, and I have not put it into action, and I haven't seen anyone else come up with it. But in real estate transactions, quite often there's an escrow, a third
Yes.
party that holds the deposits.
Yes.
Maybe something like that becomes more prevalent in the wedding industry, especially as a way to protect against potential vendor bankruptcies, where deposits are held in an escrow. The
Mm,
vendor knows the money is there, and the bride and groom are going to go through with it. And the bride and
right.
groom know that, hey, if this vendor goes out of business,
This
I'm
money
not
is there.
waiting in line at bankruptcy court to get my money back.
Just to piggyback off of that, can you tell us a little bit about why you saw the need to start eWed Insurance?
Okay, so I had an event planning, wedding planning company for a number of years. We did ultra high-end weddings,
Mm-hmm.
$1 million plus
Mm-hmm.
weddings. And I got introduced to the idea of event insurance through someone I know. They'd come to my company and talk to me about the idea, and I thought it was brilliant. And it basically came about that, if you're writing $1 million check for a wedding and something
Mm-hmm.
goes wrong, chances are you can write another $1 million check.
True.
But you know what? If you saved your whole life for your daughter's wedding for a $30,000 wedding, which is the
Right.
typical wedding, you
Yes.
don't have another $30,000.
Usually.
And then
Mm-hmm.
I looked around and I saw that there was a couple of companies doing wedding insurance. They were doing not a very good job. They were overpriced. Their coverage was from the perspective of an insurance company and not from the perspective of what do bride and grooms really need covered. And then I looked at the pricing on it, and the pricing for eWed is about 1% of the cost of the wedding.
Okay.
And that just made perfect sense. You wouldn't buy a car and not insure it. You wouldn't buy a home and not insure it.
Right.
Why would you go spend $30,000 on a wedding and not insure
I'm
it?
not
And
insured.
if you have a
Yes.
$30,000 wedding budget and you take 1% of that to buy insurance,
Mm-hmm.
your wedding budget is now $29,700.
Wow.
Not a big change.
Not big, not a big difference. But
Right.
is that 1% liability or is that
Both.
cancellation or
It's
both?
both
It's
together.
both. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, for less than the cost of, having one guest at your wedding.
Right. And you put it in perspective with that example you gave with the 1%, having $29,000 left towards your wedding. So
29,700
$29,700 left.
instead of 30,000. That's not going to put a dent in what you spend or
No,
what you get to buy for your wedding.
exactly. That's possibly one floral arrangement. Possibly.
Maybe,
Maybe.
exactly.
Okay. So when do you suggest is the correct or appropriate time to purchase the insurance?
That's a good question, and it's one I get asked all the time. And from a liability perspective, you can buy that anywhere up to the day before the wedding.
Oh.
Most couples buy it as soon as they sign the contract with
Mhm.
the venue because it's an easy thing to check off your list and be done with it.
Right.
Cancellation insurance, most people buy as soon as they start to put deposits down, because as soon as you put a deposit down with a vendor or a venue, that money's at risk. If that venue or vendor goes out of business or something, or there's a fire,
Mhm.
you could lose that deposit. You can lose
Right.
deposits well before the wedding starts. So most people buy it as soon as they start to put deposits down. And generally people buy cancellation insurance that's roughly equal to their overall budget for the wedding.
What should someone consider when purchasing or selecting a company for the insurance?
Well, like any insurance company, the first thing you want to do is make sure that the insurance company that is underwriting the policy is
Mhm.
financially stable. We are underwritten by Tokyo Marine HCC. Company's been around over 200 years. It's got a cap of $33 billion and an
Mhm.
AM Best rating of A++, which is the highest you can get. So
Okay.
you don't want to buy insurance from a company that's not going to be around to pay on a claim if something goes wrong.
Does your company provide insurance throughout the United States and only the United States or?
Yeah. Right now, eWed, we provide insurance throughout the United States, plus, its territories like Puerto Rico and Guam and things like
Yes.
that. We only provide wedding insurance, and the reason for that is we are able to offer the best price and the most comprehensive coverage by staying very focused. As soon as you get into birthdays and quinceañeras and anniversaries, then your risk of loss changes,
Right.
and you have to adjust that in your prices. So we made a conscious decision to start just with wedding insurance and offer the most comprehensive insurance available at the best possible price.
Okay. So do you, even though you don't provide it, would you would you suggest insurance for other types of events?
You know what, I would.
Okay.
I've never been someone who has been, I have to insure everything in my life, but
Right.
I've never been someone who shied away from insurance where it's smart. And I look at it as when you're writing a check for a birthday, a bar, bat mitzvah, quinceañera,
Mm-hmm.
anniversary, can you afford to lose that money?
Right.
If that losing that money would cause a hardship on you, then it's worth looking at it for insurance. And
Right.
God forbid, the mother of the bride, the father of the bride, someone in the immediate family gets into a car accident a day or 2 days before the wedding. They're not seriously hurt, but they have a broken leg, and
Right.
you want to postpone the wedding. You're
Right.
going to lose 100% of your deposits to all of your vendors in that situation.
Wow.
And like I said, for 1% of the cost of your wedding budget, you could have complete peace of mind.
Yeah. I think a lot of times people don't think about the possibility of something like that happening. They think about bigger picture, or I wouldn't say bigger picture, but the more pressing things that's related to the wedding itself. Not that something could happen to a loved one, an accident can happen that would allow, excuse me, would require them to postpone. So I think the examples you're giving right now puts a lot of things into perspective as well, for couples. Um, that being said, a lot of people are still thinking destination weddings.
Correct.
Is it harder to plan or get coverage for destination weddings that are not done within the U.S.?
It is.
International.
Most insurance policies are governed by a state by state basis.
Mm-hmm.
Cancellation insurance and liability insurance, when you're getting married in the Bahamas or in Italy or in
Mm-hmm.
France or in Colombia or wherever you might be going,
Right.
you're now subject to the laws of those countries or jurisdictions. And the insurance companies, it's too complicated to do it for the amount of money they charge. For $119 for liability insurance, a insurance company doesn't want to deal with a slip and fall that happens at a hotel in the Bahamas.
I see. I see. Okay.
So
Well,
I get a lot of calls from people looking for international insurance coverage.
yes.
I don't know anyone that covers it at any reasonable rate.
What about couples that are coming here from, say, the Bahamas or wherever to have a wedding?
Same thing. Our insurance is limited to residents of the U.S. We have a
Okay.
lot, and we've had to exclude Canadian residents getting married in the United States, which has been hard because there's a fair number of Canadians that come down. For some reason, they love Palm Springs for weddings.
Okay.
I don't know
That's
why.
a
We
hot
have some
spot.
venues. It's a hot spot. It's a nice spot during the winter.
Yes.
But once again, because the insurance is so economically priced, the insurance companies, they look at it and they say, we really only want to cover a narrow class.
Mm-hmm.
But U.S. weddings by U.S. citizens,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the hard numbers on it, but I would say it's 80 to 85% of the weddings that take place.
Yes.
So the insurance company says, look, we're not going to deal with the 10 or 15% that don't fall within that circle.
Have you seen an increase in insurance purchase
Huge.
since March or February, whenever this started? Seems like forever now, but
Right. We've seen a big uptick in cancellation insurance.
okay.
Also a nice, increase in liability insurance,
Mm-hmm.
but insurance is on people's minds. It's no
Yes.
longer in the background. It's no longer something that people don't consider. Whether they buy it or not, they're thinking about it. It's just like your question about force majeure.
Right.
People now pay attention to things like that. And yeah, we've seen a big uptick in insurance. And one of the trends we're seeing now is micro weddings, which is
Yes.
interesting
Yes.
with the limit on gatherings. And
Mm-hmm.
eWed just launched a micro wedding insurance program.
Oh, I have to look into that.
You have to look at
Yes.
it. And basically what we've done is we now offer a $5,000 cancellation policy, which will cover a typical home wedding for, less than 50 people.
Okay.
So if you're having, 25 people at your home and your budget is $5,000, and that's, for catering, the florist, maybe a DJ or something, you can now buy a policy that is custom tailored to these smaller weddings.
Well, that's very good because yes, I see that being the trend, or maybe not the trend, but what we will be doing for the next at least 6 months or so. You'll be seeing more of the micro weddings until things change for us. There's a vaccine or
Right.
something of that will make people feel more comfortable coming together in larger groupings, larger settings.
I completely agree. And you know what I'm seeing more than anything is people postponing their wedding. People, like
Yes.
I said earlier, people aren't canceling, but you also see a big increase. It used to be everyone had to get married on a Saturday night.
Yes.
Last time I checked, there's only 52 Saturday nights a year,
Only.
but there's 365 days in total. So we're
Exactly.
seeing Wednesday weddings, we're seeing Friday weddings, we're seeing, Sunday lunch and brunch weddings now.
Yes.
And, a lot of these people from February, March, April, May, and now June that have had to postpone, they're cramming their weddings into the weeks that are remaining in the rest of this year, or they're going out to next year.
Okay. Yes. Do you have any suggestions or words of advice for couples that are planning their weddings, and with regard to insurance or anything, because of your experience in weddings and in law? Is there any advice that you would give to our listeners?
I guess my first piece of advice is not as a business person, not as an insurance person, not as a lawyer, but as a human being. Don't put your plans on hold. Be smart about how you do it. You just got engaged. This should be a really enjoyable time of your
Yes.
life
Yes.
for you and your fiance. Plan and enjoy the planning. The difference is you just have some new considerations to think about that you didn't think about before. You should have been thinking about them before, but you weren't. So, buy insurance to protect yourself against the unknown. Talk to your venue, talk to your venues, and ask the what if questions that were not asked before. Everyone just assumed things would go along like normal without any hiccups. People now understand that there's such a thing as the bump in the road.
Yes.
There are hurdles that you
Yes.
have to jump over
Yes.
in planning a wedding and having your wedding.
Any advice to me or other planners like myself with regard to working with our clients for their future weddings?
That's interesting because what I'm seeing from a lot of planners, and I'm seeing it, some from caterers and florists, and this is going to be a little self-serving, but it is highly recommend that your clients buy insurance, because part of it also comes down to if something goes wrong and it's no fault of yours, and the client has some type of misfortune happen to them, and you're perfectly entitled to keep the rest of your deposit, where the other vendor is, you don't
Right.
want to look like the bad guy
Right.
saying, sorry, bride, I'm really sorry about your mother getting in a car accident yesterday, but guess what? I'm keeping your money.
Right.
Insurance allows you to say, I'm going to keep the money under the contract because I'm entitled to it. And it
Right.
allows the bride to get reimbursed. And then there's
Through
no
the
hard
insurance.
feelings. And then no one's going on Google or Yelp and issuing a scathing review
Right.
about a cold-hearted wedding planner.
Oh, that's awesome advice. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. For me as a planner, I've recommended, I usually recommend to all of my clients that they get insurance. But like I said before, most people only consider the liability insurance. And I've never really pushed them on the cancellation. But I've done birthday parties that the budget was more than weddings that I've done. So that's my question about whether or not they should get it for both. Because I really do see people spend so much more, like you said, a bar mitzvah, a quince, these birthday parties that have grown, and baby showers that have grown to be very lavish events, that there's a lot of money that if they had to spend it again, they did not have. So
Right.
this whole situation has allowed me to think more about encouraging my clients to purchase the cancellation because we just don't know what the future holds, you know?
No, you don't know. And I had a suggestion offered by a venue, or a venue was doing this. I'm not going to take credit for this idea, but I thought it was a brilliant idea. So they require liability insurance, and they really want to encourage their couples to get cancellation insurance. And what they did is they went to the couple and they said, if you buy cancellation insurance, we will credit you back a portion of the purchase. So it's up to the couple. And I thought that was really smart.
Yes.
You know what? We'll cost of a $10,000 policy, I think, is $100 and a quarter or something. They'll say, we'll credit you back $100 and a quarter if you buy a $10,000 policy, and the couple can buy more, of course.
Right.
But I thought that was a excellent way to motivate the couple to buy it. And if something went wrong and the couple did not buy it, the venue in that situation, or the planner, has, I guess you could say, clean hands, because they say, look, I did everything I could to get you to buy it. It was your choice not to buy it.
Yes.
I'm really sorry you've lost deposits, but if you had listened to me, you would have been protected.
Right. That is really a good idea. And I know I will definitely be encouraging my clients moving forward to purchase both.
Right. And, you know, from your fees to credit them $100 or $125 or even $150, it's not going to change your margins to any great degree, and it provides a huge amount of peace of mind for everyone.
For both parties involved. Yes, definitely. Well, David, thank you so very much you shared so much information. I'm sure there's a lot more questions I can come up with, but I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this with us and give us the benefit of your experience and your knowledge. So thank you. And we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. My pleasure. Happy to join you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Wedding and Beyond podcast. For more advice on planning your wedding and preparing for a successful marriage, make sure to comment and subscribe wherever you're listening. Follow us on Instagram at the Wedding and Beyond podcast, and visit our website at royaloccasionsinc.com. Until next time.